Coming to you from top secret field offices worldwide, these brave men and women fight a battle for truth, justice, and good clean data. These agents of change make up the Bureau of Records, Objects, and Standards. They are the Data Bros.
Welcome to Data Bros, your weekly 30-minute, tight 30-minute appointment with us, the Data Bros, where we talk about the comic book industry, comic book data, and everything that goes into running a modern comic store. This is episode 13 of season 1, Inflation versus Comics, the battle for the bottom line. I'm your host, Django, and with me are Jeffrey Figley.
What's the deal with inflation?
And Brian, the Garside.
Data.
I don't know, man. It's
data.
You said it
differently every time you said it there. Data?
Yeah.
Or is it data?
What's the deal with data?
Data. Listen, guys, before we get too far, I want to shout out our title sponsor, Murphy's Apple Juice. They're great. And it's the shape, not the taste, but it's also the taste, which is pretty dang good, if I do say so myself.
First apple juice company to be intimately involved in the production and design of the 2027 space shuttle.
It's wild, dude. Like the shape of that shuttle matching the shape of their original glass bottle is impressive. I'm surprised.
Blasting off to the future, one pit at a time.
Yep.
You guys, I am super excited because I am mere days away from getting some Murphys into me.
Oh, yeah. You got to cross the border to get that.
I got to cross the border, but I am
south.
so excited about
Yeah.
it. As soon as I get over to Murphy's, first thing I do, 7-Eleven, Murphy's apple juice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, 7-Eleven, one of their title sponsors, they're the only people that have the Murphy's Apple Juice display box.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know we talked about this last week, but I had another thought about a memory that I have, and then we can move on. But I remember going to a bar when I was like 22 years old, and I didn't drink. And I ordered just a shot of Fireball, and I dumped it out on the floor and filled the cup with Murphy's apple juice, so everybody would think
Right
I
in
was
front
cool.
of them. Oh,
No, I just wanted to fit in. I was the only sober one there.
Hey,
Dude.
Speaking of 2022 and drink, so this, okay. So one time my buddies and I were in Toronto. It would be pre-2003. So there was definitely Murphy's around. We could not, we didn't have a lime, and we didn't have salt, and we had tequila.
Mm-hmm.
And we originally tried Sour Patch Kids,
Mm-hmm.
and they were terrible. But then we found in the fridge, at the back of the fridge, bottle of Murphy's.
I've never even heard this story, and I know exactly where it's going.
Half Murphy's, half tequila.
Yeah.
You will not taste, I kid you not. Go try it. You will not taste the tequila.
They call it a hay murmur.
No. We call it Aquila. No. We call it Murphkila.
It was so good.
To Kirkies.
That's crazy that memory just came to my head. All right, let's talk our topic. Jay,
Inflation
this week.
Well, this week we're going to talk about the impacts of inflation on the comics industry.
I don't like this episode already.
Just
call back to last
hate
week, eh?
Get your snoozer on,
inflation.
Brian. We're going to look at rising prices and the pressures of inflation, rising rents, labor costs, and everything else, and how holding the line at $2.99 is a fantasy that doesn't match up with reality.
What a noble tagline, though.
It's a good tagline.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Battle
like
for the
my
bottom
favorite
line.
part about that is that you could also say hold the line at $9.99.
Yeah.
Holding
It
the
sounds
line
just
at
as good.
$14.99.
Yeah.
Distillery is currently holding the line at $8.99.
Yeah.
God bless.
So if you're new to this podcast, I'm sorry about the Murphy stuff. Well, I'm not sorry because they pay us, but we've got 3 segments in this podcast, and we stick to it just like we stick to a tight 30-minute podcast. We're going to talk about data broification, which is the underlying data that supports our subject. We're going to do a little bit of industry Yammer.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is how the comics industry supports or presents challenges with our subject matter. And we're going to do some shop talk where we discuss the practical ins and outs of the subject and how we deal with the topic in a retail environment. So let's start with the data broification of it all.
So I'm looking at your notes right now, Django, and I see a lot of numbers here.
Yeah.
How are we going to make this?
Well, so we got a lot of numbers here. I think the most interesting numbers to me are the gallon of milk, right? So there's a lot of ways to look at inflation. When you hear them talk about inflation on the radio, they're like, oh, inflation's at 8% or whatever. But we see some things in our lives are way under that, and some things in our lives are way over that. So there's like the reality of inflation versus the benchmarks for government defined inflation or whatever. I like to think about how many comics can I buy for a gallon of milk, right?
So,
go ahead, Brian.
So, and maybe this has just become because I come from a primarily socialist country. Is the cost of milk not like super controlled?
It's complete garbage. So maybe we should look at it as a cost of a gallon of gas. But like those two things, like you could look at it. We could choose anything, right?
Okay.
He's always like, that's a gallon and a half of comic book right there.
Yeah. That's 3/4 of a loaf of bread.
Yeah,
because I feel like looking at the cost of a gallon of milk versus the cost of gas feels to me, and there's that word feeling, more
data
accurate,
feeling.
More accurate. The data feels this way during it feels closer to my own reality, right? Like
sure.
So let's go through the cost of a gallon of milk. What did a gallon of milk cost in 1993?
In 1993, a gallon of milk cost $2.09.
I don't know what a gallon is, but that sounds like a bargain at twice the price.
I think it's 4 quarts. 10 years later, in 2003, it was $2.76, which is only a 32% increase. And then in 2023, it was $2.80, which is 1.45% increase since 2003. So like, obviously there's some subsidies and some shenanigans going on there. Cause I
know y'all are trying to get your American milk into my precious Canadian cows, and I don't appreciate it. Don't appreciate it.
Asking for it, bud. So like, we've seen over the last 20 years, a 34% increase in the cost of a gallon of milk.
Okay.
And I think that's a simplified way to look at this. Gas, on the other hand, started in 1993 was $2.23 a gallon. It went up 12.6% to $2.50 in 2003, and then in 2023 it was at $4.90, which is 119% up from 1993. So that's huge. And then when we look at comics, 1993, a comic cost $2.19. In 2003, it cost $3.08, which was a 41% increase.
Holding the line at $2.99. 2003.
Yep. And then in 2023, a comic's average cost is $4.94, which is up 126% from 1993. So if you're looking at the cost versus gas, it's pretty similar.
Yeah, it's almost, it's pretty much bang on.
Yeah, which is interesting because we hate how much we pay for gas.
Do houses though?
Well, yeah. So houses have gone up 387% since 1993, which is bonkers.
Check this out. You guys did that funny little bit where you're like gallons and quarts, and then I was excited to make the joke about the only unit of measurement I understand are grams and ounces, which is like a marijuana thing. But then it prompted me to Google the effect of inflation on marijuana. What do you think?
And then?
Same as comics.
So price is going down.
See,
inflation is having an adverse effect.
Huh.
Well, is it that or is it legalization?
It's surely got to do with legalization, but even prior to the legalization, there was like a very inconsistent amount of inflation going on with marijuana.
Because
Interesting.
like
It's very interesting.
if you look at prohibition and alcohol, the repeal of prohibition caused liquor prices to plummet.
Huh.
So yeah. So okay, what is this, Django? Django,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
does any of this mean? What does it mean to me
Well,
as
I
a
mean,
comic loving consumer?
as a comic loving fool, um, I think that it's okay that comics go up in price. From my perspective, I think we should expect comics to go up in price. I
Yep.
would hope that that means that the creators and all the people upstream and downstream are getting paid a little bit better
Yeah.
to kind of help with inflation. I don't know that that's really the case. I don't know what page rates are, but I doubt that a page rate from 20 years ago matched inflation since then.
Hmm.
Well, and we've also seen like a massive kind of cratering of the numbers too, right? Although I always wonder because if you look at the dollar sales,
Mhm.
they seem to be relatively well, they're increasing, right? Like marginally. Up until 2019, they kind of increased and then they went down in 2020 and then they like skyrocketed in 2021 and 2022. And then
Mhm.
2023 was down from 2022, but everyone says you should actually compare 2023 to 2019.
Right.
So it was up from 2019, but it was down from 2020.
That's a
God,
lot
that's
of
a lot
ups
of
and
math.
downs,
Yeah.
Brian.
But basically what I'm saying is the overall numbers are going up, and what we're seeing is like, the Diamond catalog used to be 1,500 SKUs, and now it's literally 3,600 SKUs, right?
Right. Right.
And that doesn't include all the stuff that is exclusive to Lunar or other distributors.
Mhm.
So the there's probably more books. Well, there is more comics being made that are
Smaller print
selling,
runs.
smaller print runs.
Yeah.
Words are hard today for me.
Yeah, it's a weird gumbo of how you value this stuff.
Mhm.
I
I
mean,
think no, yeah, go ahead.
so there's many conversations that could be coming out of the subject matter of inflation. So what our route here is, I'm interested for us to be discovering. But one thing that comes to my mind is this idea of holding the line at $2.99, and a conversation Django and I had often about Alterna comics when they were
Mhm.
coming out.
Oh my
And
God.
those were what?
Which were
Like,
199 or
I think
No,
a
they were
dollar ninety,
dollar
or they were 99 cents,
Yeah.
150, something like that.
cheap.
And the idea of that being, let's make some cheap comics. Stores can order them. They could be less concerned about the lost cost of unsold comics, and people will be more willing to buy them because they're cheap. In a best case scenario, trying to run a business off of stocking comics where the highest amount of profit you could be making is like 45 cents or something,
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
like 60 cents, isn't an awesome prospect in my mind. That's not like
Right.
super, super cool. You have to be able to sell that really, really well. So this advertisement of like holding the line at $2.99, or the idea of DC wanting to hold on to that, when that first came up, and I guess it's probably been happening forever. But to me, it doesn't seem hugely advantageous to be able to doing that, except for to the consumer of the comic, the customer, not the retailer ordering it.
Right.
But like, yeah, I don't know. The inflation
mean,
seems like a necessary part to me.
that was part of the problem with newsstands, right? Like magazines kept creeping up in price and
Yep.
comics stayed low. So then comics had less and less presence on the newsstand, and because they were less profitable. And like the fallout from that is what we're still seeing, which is a generation that didn't have the same kind of access to comics.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the death of newsstands for the most part. Like it's I went to a store one day, I think before I got involved in the comic shop. I went into a home goods store and they had all of their prices on the back of their products, which is something we do at our shop.
Mhm.
And I asked them, I was like, why don't you put this on the front? And she said, well, because we're selling the product, we're not selling the price. And it feels like
Interesting.
at this point, comics are trying to sell the price, not the product, when they're trying to keep it cheap. And, we've seen that a quality comic will sell, even if it's $1 more than its nearest neighbor. People pay an extra $1 for the cardstock covers at DC.
So
Right.
what's funny as a Canadian is I literally don't know week to week what I'm going to pay for a comic, because
Right.
for us it's tied to the exchange rate, which can fluctuate between $1.30 and $1.37 in a
Right.
given week, right? So, like Feral #1, I couldn't even tell you what I paid for it. I know I bought it, and I didn't really care what I was going to pay for it because I was buying that comic no matter what it cost.
Yeah, that's
Now,
a really
Brave and
interesting
the Bold,
approach.
I will tell you, I paid too much for it, because
Yeah,
I think I
but
paid like
like,
$12 for that book, and
so I
it
think
doesn't
that
fit.
like sticking really vehemently to a sticker price is a kind of uniquely American thing.
Yeah.
Or maybe not uniquely American, but you're saying like, your price is going to fluctuate, even though it's only maybe like cents at a time. It still forces a lack of rigidity to, these ideas of I'm not paying more than $49.99 for a comic, because what if
Yes.
it's $5.12 this week?
And this started back in, I want to say, like 2006 or 2007, when they stopped printing Canadian cover prices on comics. Maybe it was even before that. But there was a period there where $1 American was $1.65 Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
So it was literally like 1.6 times, right? So
Right.
a $3 comic is suddenly like a 5.50 Canadian. And it's been like that for years here.
Yeah.
Django,
Yeah.
you had mentioned just sort of like magazine stands and their role there. And, it caused the thought in me, and maybe I've mentioned on this podcast before, but like that distinction, magazines and comics, is fascinating to me. No one is concerned about
Mm-hmm.
the increasing price of magazines. They are going up in cost for us, Rolling Stone, any of
Exponentially,
those,
yeah. They're
exponentially.
huge.
You can get these, or they started, in the same locations. The difference, very few people in my mind collect magazines and have their short boxes for their magazines and their Life and People
Very
magazine
different
and
way of
stuff.
doing it. Yeah.
Really, Jeff,
And
because my Star Wars insiders and
well, yeah,
Fangorias that are sitting next to
sure,
me would indicate
sure. Well,
otherwise.
yeah, but you are a comic collector.
I
So
see what you're saying.
that's applying to
Yeah.
that population there. So the larger population
Yeah.
consuming these things. So we're not upset about the increasing price of this thing that we oftentimes throw away after reading.
Mm-hmm.
Yet
That's
these
true.
other things that we buy, collect, worry about the condition and what their resale value is going to be, are staying at a lower value, and we get upset about that increasing. And that to me seems like two ideas that are totally at odds with each other.
Comics are still less expensive than a greeting card,
Yeah.
Oh
which,
my.
like,
Yeah.
you get 30 seconds of enjoyment out of a greeting card if you can trick me into opening it up and reading it, because I
Yeah.
might not, right?
Yeah.
So like, just the amount that we look down on the comic book as a value for what you're getting, which is 20 pages, maybe more, of story that has had the heart and soul of a half a dozen people poured into it, is pretty wild.
And also
Yeah,
the
that's true.
possibility that it's going to change your outlook on the world around you.
Yeah. Yeah. Very few greeting cards have done that to me.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of like dipping our toes in the soaking bath of industry Yammer here already,
Nice.
but
Let it soak, I say.
let it just sit there. We have some numbers here, and these are slushy numbers, but
Slushy
comic
numbers.
stores are getting the largest slice of the profit from the physical copy of a comic book.
Right.
So the retailer is getting 40 to 60% of the cover price goes to them,
That's based off of their discount
based off their
tier,
discount.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
So
sure.
like, they're also paying rent. They're also paying staff. They're also paying for warehousing. There's a
Shipping.
million other things.
Paying for
But
shipping, yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, their actual amount is maybe lower than that, but yeah.
Yeah. Distributors, from what we know, get between 5 to 10% of the cover price per issue that ships out, and publishers get around 30%. Publishers are also covering printing costs, creator salaries, editor costs, office build. There's plenty. I don't think I don't think there's a clean way to look at all of this, but it is interesting. I think you said earlier, Brian, before we started recording, that retailers get the biggest slice of the smallest pie
Correct. Yeah.
in comic sales. So
While the publishers are getting the smallest slice, well, not the smallest, but a smaller slice of the whole pie.
right.
They're selling
They're
tens of
selling
thousands of
tons
copies and getting
of them.
30% of it.
Yeah.
You're selling 100 copies and getting 50% of it.
And like it's an industry that works.
For sure.
We're pretty stable in the numbers that we have for comic stores and all that. Yeah, I don't have anything more intelligent to say about all of that. Just that it's an interesting thing to look at, where we have the amount that each place takes, and it makes sense to me that the retailer who has to make their money selling just a few of them gets the largest slice of that. And it's the wholesale versus retail kind of game that you play.
What I think is interesting about this is when you look at these numbers and you think about like similar industries, right? So if we take digital goods, digital, like the Apple Music Store and everything, Apple keeps 30% of it, and then the publisher gets 70% of it.
Right.
Same thing goes for music and movies and even the Comixology days back before they left Apple. I know they were getting like, I think the cut was 30 for Comixology, 70 for the publisher.
Okay.
So in this case, like it's inverted, where
Right.
the publisher is only getting 30%, but I think it's a much larger pie. Like I think at the height, digital was doing 10% of what physical comics were doing.
I think the difference there, though, is that there's the physical artifact that has much different costs to produce.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So like it's kind of comparing like
it
apples
does,
and
but
robots
does
there.
it? Because the question I've always had is like, from what we've understood, the printing costs are a relatively small sliver of that. Everything else is the editorial, the creator, the overhead, all that stuff is consistent through.
Yeah, but a relatively small portion of something that's 10 times bigger than the digital distribution would mean that if they're paying a quarter per comic, and they have to print 30,000 of them in order to print one, then it's still way cheaper by absolute dollars to sell the digital thing.
That's true.
Right. It's I think they're just too different to really compare the split there.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things we've talked about is like the fact that the downward pressure, the kind of customer expectation that comics should be $2.99 isn't really in line with the realities. And I think we're probably going to talk about this a little bit more in the shop talk section when we talk about things like minimum wage, rent, which in the last 5 years has skyrocketed. Labor costs and all that stuff have gone up. When we look at stuff like Marvel's pricing schemes, which although they did kind of announce at Comics Pro, they're going to try and maintain a $3.99 cover price. That's
they found the cheapest cover stock in the entire world to help with that.
And now DC's using the same cover stock, it seems. Although to be fair, I feel like Image's stuff is pretty bad lately too.
Yeah, their paper quality. Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma, that increasing price and who are we trying to satisfy by keeping prices low?
Yeah,
and it's got to be the reader, right? So then the reader gets to buy more comics if they want. The thing that's interesting to me is, Daniel, you mentioned earlier, like what is that extra money going towards? And hopefully it's going towards better rates for the people who are creating these comics.
Right.
I, as a just good faith, try to assume that that's what's happening. And I'm sure it's obviously percentages that are dividing into all sorts of populations. But to me, the idea that people would resist getting a living wage to the people creating this stuff that means a lot to them is once again like a fallacy in logic in my mind. And of course,
Well,
everybody has different reasons that they buy things.
yeah.
I
I mean,
almost feel like they don't think of that. Most
as
people.
yeah,
Yeah.
as we slip into shop talk, huh? You guys like
No,
that?
I
As
love
we
that.
as we
Although we could soak a little longer, Django, or we could get out onto the dock.
let's get out on the dock, the shop talk dock, and talk some shop on the dock.
Yeah.
Shop Talk has a dock.
We got space for
Is
that.
the dock out back?
Oh yeah,
Wait, the
Outback.
loading dock?
Outback.
That dock.
Is that where?
That dock out that. Anyway.
Dachau.
Oh.
Sorry, that's where Getty Lee's parents met.
Oh,
Where?
interesting.
Where did you
The
say?
concentration camp, Dachau.
Are you serious?
You've been on a heck of a rush kick for a couple of weeks here, bud.
I have
You're
been,
more
yeah.
Canadian than I am right now.
I am, and I wanted you to recognize that without me telling you. Thank you.
So I think that some stores see some price resistance from their customers. And I think that our store sees a little bit of price resistance from our customers, but not as much as it feels like other shops do. And I don't know if that's our perception. I don't know if that's our market, or I don't know if it's just stores kind of focusing on the 3 or 4 people who complain about a price hike. Because we have customers who hate it when prices change, but we also have a lot of people who don't even seem to notice. Like they've got a budget that's a percentage of their paycheck that they're going to put towards comics, and that's kind of what they do. I think it can be tricky for a comic store when our costs suddenly go up 50 cents a comic, right?
Yeah.
Like that can be kind of shocking and make our numbers look weird until things catch up.
And as you've said to me before, you can't exactly increase the price of your burger on your menu because it's printed on the cover.
With our minimum wage in Washington in 1993, to go back to our 10-year increments here, our minimum wage was $4.25.
That seems too low.
In 2003, it was $7.01, which was a 65% hike. And in 2023, it was $15.74, which was up 270% since 1993. At the end of next year, or the beginning of next year, we're going to be at $18.75 or $19 an hour. And we're selling the same comic for the same cover price as somebody in a state that has $8.50 minimum wage,
and probably paying more to receive it.
Yeah, because everything down the line costs more.
Let's just point out that the price of a comic book went up 126% between 1993 and 2023, and the minimum wage in Washington State went up 200, like literally double. More than double percentage.
Yeah.
That's there you go, folks.
So like, I don't know, but that's Washington, right? Like some states, I think in states that have a really low minimum wage, it feels to me like employees get paid $10 to $12 an hour.
Well,
right?
here in Ontario, our numbers are pretty similar to those. Now that's in Canadian dollars, but still. When I was in university back in 93, I remember I was making $3 something an hour. And then I wasn't making minimum wage in 2023, but I do remember it had almost doubled in 10 years. And now it just went up on April 1st. I think it's it's around that 15.35 or something like that. It's pretty close here in Ontario.
I don't begrudge anybody getting paid more. Like, I don't think that the minimum wage hike is bad. I don't know that it solves the problem that some people are trying to solve with it, but
it's a minimum wage, right? That is the floor that people should be paying people so that they can live in that particular area. That's the whole point of it. It's a social construct.
Totally fair. And like Jeff and I had a long runway when minimum wage started going up pretty drastically in Washington. I think we had like a 5-year ramp where it just went up once or twice a year. And we had a conversation when that was announced, like, okay, comics aren't going to change their price for us, so how are we going to make more money? Just so that we can meet our payroll obligations.
So that's a great point. Let's dive into some deep shop talk. How did you do that when you went up that drastically that quickly and you can't change the price of your burger.
I think
Yes.
what do you think our biggest trick was?
Well, so yeah, I mean, again, all of this conversation about inflation to say like what are we trying to say about it? And it's how do stores deal with this? And then how do publishers relate to this? And then you, the consumer, as well, like what things should be factoring into your brain? And I think at this point, I want to make clear, like, you know, your comic shop doesn't control the price of a comic for the most point. So like if people are thinking like, oh, the comic shop is getting more money for that, like not really, but I just want to increase the willingness from people to not be upset about increased prices, because hopefully it's making the world of this medium that you like better. But yeah, what are the things that we then did with all of this stuff in mind to be able to prepare for it, because it does put stores at a disadvantage. I
Like,
never thought at 34 I would have any negative feelings about minimum wage going up, but like we're in a very tough spot because of comics having a printed price, like you've been saying.
so like some of our solutions were to expand the product lines that we were offering to some
Yes.
things that we could control our costs and maybe mark up a little bit differently than we do
Yep.
comics.
Yep.
Like for example, our pop figures were like our base pop figure price was a couple dollars over MSRP,
Right.
and they sold just as well as if they weren't, except to the super fans who knew where to get it super cheap, and that's
Sure.
fine.
And you're never going to
Um,
sell to those people anyway, to be
yeah,
honest.
they
Like you're
weren't
not
going to
losing
love.
anything.
Yeah,
We had to explore alternative product lines. We had not gotten super into selling Pokemon singles up to that point, and that has happened kind of simultaneously with exploring Moonbase and developing a system for Pokemon singles, but leaning into products that have a flexible margin increase. So like
back
Pokemon
issues.
singles and back issues would be the other big one. Being able
What
to maximize what you can do with your man hours to get product that doesn't rely on the same margins that new comics do.
what is Moonbase?
Moonbase was a store that we experimented with for about a year
Oh, okay.
across town.
Yeah.
We had a satellite store named
Okay.
Moonbase, and it was so slow and boring that it gave us time to kind of experiment with some other things.
Um,
Don't recommend it.
the other, things that we did, like we explored acquiring product from places like overseas that once again had a subjective retail markup. Um, and then, so that was our two big changes we've made that have drastically changed the shape and way we approach our business moving forward, right? Like back issues, we have way more desire to deal with as owners because we see the security that they offer our business. I think that was exploring. I think one of the best innovating things that we did was develop a good system for pre-ordering and prepayment, and then really trying to get our employees to value that procedure as well.
Yeah.
And then you guys, I believe, and I could be totally off on this, you kind of changed your discounting
We
philosophy, right?
we stopped offering discounts by default
Right.
to new subscribers. We have some legacy people who still get that. We're probably on the cusp of changing the way that those work, not necessarily giving them a lower discount, but making it a buy X get Y kind of situation so that
Yep.
the discount happens after the payment happens.
So more like a rewards program instead of a discount
Yeah.
program. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've kind of outlined a new subscriber set of benefits that are good benefits for our subscribers, but that have kind of ulterior motives to increase their engagement in the store or to, reward them with things that we come by easier than just a straight credit for a new comic, which is kind of expensive.
I'm going to put that down as a total topic that we should delve into really deeply, because I think
Probably so.
talking about discounting, talking about rewards programs, and really, I've got some specific ideas around rewards programs where if you're treating a rewards programs more like air miles than a free for all, I think you're going to make a lot more money. And I've got some specific ways how you could be making more money that way, and how it's still
Yeah.
super valuable to customers.
And that's the balance to strike, right? Like
Yeah.
how do you give people value and also not lose money? Like how can you do that nice thing for people and also from a very mathematical business standpoint make more money?
Yeah.
Well, Django,
Well,
that's
and remember that the word is loyalty program, right? It's not the
Yeah.
rewards program. It's a loyalty program. A lot of people
Yeah.
forget that though. It's like so essential.
Django. You know, your just statement fed into this idea I took a note down, which was like, this is maybe useless to some listeners, but I think one of the most important things for me, and this might be a no-brainer, is like I never thought that I'd be somebody that owns a business. It's a type of thinking about things that I don't naturally have as much. As minimum wage was going up, Django and I had to have these conversations about how to find these margins, how to find ways to make
Sure.
money. And the most important thing for me was to healthily reconsider how I mentally approach this stuff. And it isn't just like, it had to change from just a benevolent socialist, like I just want everyone to have this stuff. Like, it would emphasize that there is a bottom line. It emphasized that in order to stay in business, we have to be making money, and trying to pass that change of thinking down to our employees. It took a reconfiguring of my priorities. And that is a pretty huge deal for me, because this whole thing is kind of, for many people, a moral issue. And there are stores who are like, no, bags and boards will always be free at my store, or, you know, other things like that. And analyzing where I find rigidity in my own beliefs, and where that is combative with the idea of staying in business in a world where inflation is going up and the margins are bad. That's one of the most important things that has happened to me in the last 10 years around this conversation, and sort of at the encouragement of Django and that type of thinking about things, which I just think is not a natural type of thinking for everyone.
It's kind of I think a part of becoming an adult is realizing that you, in order to do the good things, you have to meet a minimum threshold of survival.
Absolutely.
Right. So if you want to help somebody else, first you have to be a little bit cutthroat to get to a position where you can help them. And it's the same thing with the comic store. Like we always think community first, right after we finish paying the bills.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we have to hit this benchmark before we can do anything else.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is we're going long, you guys. This was a loose 30, loose soaking in the
Loose 30.
loose 30.
Loose 30.
Thanks for listening to us talk about inflation, comic books, retail, all of this stuff.
In a future episode, and I've kind of put it off because it's a big one, but we are going to do a real big deep dive into financials. And so I don't know if I've told you guys this before, but I once ran a competitor to QuickBooks. It was called Balance Due. It was an invoicing application. And during that, we had hired some MBAs to come and do a whole bunch of stuff. So I know way more about the 4 ratios that every business should know, and so much accounting stuff that I wish I didn't still have in my brain. But it's like, most comic shop owners don't get into comics as a business because they love accounting.
Right.
They get into comics because they love comics.
Or even to make money.
Right. But the thing is, if you know the accounting principles and you know the basics, you will last a lot longer and you'll be a lot happier. And we'll talk about that in a future episode for sure.
In the future. But in the meantime, we want to hear from you. Write to us at podcast@DataBros Inc. DataBros Inc. DataBros.com. Don't forget to like us. You already like us, but click the like button. Rate us. You're probably already rating us.
Perfect tens.
And you know, find us on your favorite podcast app. Watch us online at youtube.com. Are we putting these online?
Yeah, baby. Not video. They're
Inc.
just audio.
Oh,
youtube.com/
what
listen
to us on YouTube. You'll find Data Bros and all of our projects at databrosinc.com. You can also learn about the Comet Standard at cometstandard.com. If you don't know what that is, look back in your feed, you'll find it. I'm Brian Garside. Oh wait, sorry guys, I was why don't you guys
I'm Brian Garside.
Oh, that's
you
Brian
can
Garside.
Find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Managed Comics, and you'll discover everything you need to know about Managed Comics there.
And if the subject matter of this episode to you was kind of a bummer, it You know, but I
It
want
sucks.
everyone to know that like it is the necessary part of trying to benevolently share this thing that we love with everybody. So we don't love thinking about it either, but it's a necessary component of the whole thing. So thanks for taking this dive with us. I'm Jeff, and what's the deal with that guy?
Huh, I don't know. I'm Django. Something about comicshopassistant.com.
Jeff at Jeff Figley on Venmo.
We're just this way, good fellas.
The Data Bros is a joint project from the teams behind Comic Shop Assistant and Manage Comics. Data Bros are Django Boren, Jeff Figley, and Brian Garside. Brian Garside produces and edits the episode. And you'll find more about the Data Bros online at databrosinc.com. Subscribe, like, and review the Data Bros on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts.